Sports presents Benning Bites with Damon Benning. Benning Bites with Damon Benning.
Another episode of Benning Bites. This one was interesting. Pretty spirited show yesterday, fresh off the weekend, right? You thought maybe College World Series may dominate the Open, but man, it was about recruiting. We had a fantastic conversation with Sam McEwen, and he was talking about some of the letters that he received in his email about media and folks alike not holding, I don't know what this means, but in essence, not holding Coach Rhule accountable. I guess maybe the criticisms of the recruiting style, fresh on the heels of some more camp offers and guys that are obviously off the grid in terms of the national scope, but guys in which the staff has looked at right in front of them, right? They performed at camp and they made offers. I got just a couple of my DMs that said, hey, are you still pretending it's normal that we're taking commitments like hotcakes from D2 level players? Rhule and staff must be geniuses to be evaluating these 2024 kids as takes when no other FBS programs do so. Going to be fascinating, and maybe they can develop them, but no previous Nebraska staff ever could. And I was getting a lot of that. And I guess there's a couple of different arguments I think to be made or discussion points. And listen, I get it. From the fan base perspective about consternation and the camps and all the offers and what does it mean? How many is Nebraska going to take? Are there spots? Are there not spots? Listen, I'm right dab smack in the middle of it, and I understand it. But I think Nebraska may be, well, it's a couple things. Nebraska may be in a position where, listen, it's another big class, and they let people sort it out where this will be a staff that will process you out rather quickly, right? We'll bring in good numbers. We'll spark competition. We'll let the chips fall where they may, and we'll have other guys do some other things, some other places if it doesn't work out. That may be part of the process. It may also be that they just trust their evaluations, kind of who they are and where they are. And I know you guys are like, yeah, that's fine, but this isn't Temple. This isn't Baylor. But it's hard, and you guys kind of ask yourself, if you've got a kind of a proven formula, you look at body comp and times and you watch guys play and run around and it's worked before for you. How many times do you often care that if somebody else likes him or they don't like him, right? That's just kind of the natural flow of being an alpha in that business. So maybe that's the geniuses part that my guy was talking about when he sent me the message. Or maybe it's one of those deals where it could be an or an and. Maybe in year one, there are certain intangibles that they're looking to go with tangibles. When they put it together with the film and the personnel that they've had coming back, kind of how they haven't been able to get over the hump in some of these close games. Maybe there's like this formula that we aren't privy to because we're not there evaluating like they are, where they're thinking if we can just add this, if we can just develop this, or in year one, if we can just establish this, maybe what could happen potentially down the road with procuring talent. And maybe that's it. And I always kind of made the case the last 5-6 years, I'm pretty consistent. There's only a couple of games that I can remember where I felt like it just boiled down to not having good enough players. And by that, I mean, I felt like, man, if Nebraska would have just, anytime I start the conversation with something I felt like Nebraska could have done differently, then I'm not making it about talent. And I felt like they had good enough players to win situationally. They needed to make some changes. I think taking better care of the football. There are a lot of things, right? I mean, we somehow made last year about an onside kick. Was that about talent? I don't think so. So as long as you're having those kinds of conversations, I'm not going to get into the talent discussion because I think, and that's not to say it's not valid. I'm telling you kind of where I'm at as I'm watching this and even have people in the recruiting landscape right there in my household. To go from 3 or 4 wins to 7 or 8 isn't a talent issue. To go from 8 or 9 wins to 10 or 11, that would be a different conversation, because I think Coach Rhule said this, and he's kind of told you what you needed to know, where he's trying to build the culture a certain way, and he knows he has to earn the right for some top level commitments, right? Where they have to win some games first, which is also why he's appreciative of folks that have faith before they get this thing turned around, which he absolutely believes that they will. So in the meantime, I just don't think he's going to sacrifice, because we've seen some other coaches do that, right? Where they want to win so badly, that they recruit in such a way, or they take some guys that they ordinarily wouldn't take because it's not necessarily a cultural fit, but they think that that's what gets them over the hump. And that just simply hasn't worked. So we've seen it done a couple of different ways. So I'm not saying there can't be a little anxiety over star watching, but we just don't know yet if this isn't Temple or this isn't Baylor, because what we do know is they have a good eye for talent, and they're good talent evaluators. Now, how will that play in the Big Ten? We don't know. But I would challenge you with this. When you look at what Illinois did to us, or Wisconsin, or Minnesota, or Purdue, or anybody else in the conference schedule, how many times did you stop and say, man, if we just had more talent? I think situationally and fundamentally and culturally, you wanted Nebraska to be better. I mean, even when Northwestern beat us, that wasn't about talent. And so until you get to the point where you're beating those teams with the blueprint that they've proven works, development, identity, culture, weren't those all the things that Wisconsin, Iowa, and Northwestern, when Fitz was doing his thing, wasn't it about Minnesota? Wasn't it about the culture? So that's definitely part of it. And I don't mean to be, be a cynic about the word, because it absolutely matters. So I think once you start being able to compete and beat those teams regularly, then we can move to the next phase about, okay, what gets us over the hump? Because sometimes that's culture too. Not always helps to have good players, so I don't want to say that. But I think you kind of just have to be a little bit patient to see how it plays out. Remember, Nebraska's playing catch up to some degree. They don't have a winning record against anybody in the West. And so you have to do it a little bit differently, and you can't fast forward to 4 and 5 star caliber talent. You can get some, but remember, let's not be disingenuous. He was shooting for the moon early on in this recruiting period, right? Remember that first weekend of visits on the 25th of March? That was pretty star-studded, no pun intended. And he went after some big fish. So I think we gotta have to kind of chill. Those guys weren't saying yes. That doesn't mean you settle. That just means you have some obstacles. And so you have to take a few detours. And if it's not going to be this, then it's got to be this. If we can't win with this, then let's try to win with this. So I think we got to kind of be patient and let that play out, at least for year one, and see how it goes before we make any sweeping judgments on recruiting prowess. Because remember, how many of you would say yes just because? I don't know what that answer is, but I think that that's food for thought before we get into the critiquing game. Apple, Google, Spotify, 590, KFOR at 9 in Lincoln, however you get us. We appreciate you. Give my man Andrew Rogers a follow. Stick around for coffee and cream. Never know what could happen with us two yahoos. It's another episode of Benning Bites.